Hello and good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first Institute of Hospitality webinar of 2025. My name's Sam Coulstock, and I'm your host for this morning, and I'm the Head of Professional Development here at the IoH. Today, we have an expert panel to talk about Beyond Design, Remarkable Architecture and Exceptional Hospitality. But before we start, we have a few housekeeping items to run through. So please ask as many questions as you'd like through the Q&A on your screen, on the facility on your screen. We'll aim to finish within the hour, and remember that you can use the next hour towards your CPD hours and to record that on your institute's dashboard. Today's webinar will be filmed and placed on our on-demand channel, which will be live very soon, and you can watch this back as and when you need it. So without further ado, let's introduce our panel. And I'm going to start as it is on my screen. So I'm just going to start with you, Gina, if you wouldn't mind, just a little bit about yourself, who you are and why you're a member of the Institute.
Thank you, Sam. My name is Gina Consing-Magadam. I'm a fellow of the Institute of Hospitality. I was elected a fellow in 2022. And I'm very, very proud to be a member. I can't think of any other organization, professional body that is like ours, where we have all the opportunities for peer-to-peer engagement and also continuous professional development on a range of topics, including, as we have today, architecture and how it impacts on our hospitality experience and how it helps to reinterpret and redefine our cultural experience. I've worked in the hospitality industry for over 35 years in different roles. I was at the National Training Organization for Hospitality for 10 years, where I covered marketing communications, and latterly as Head of Policy and Public Affairs. I moved from then into the private sector, and I worked with Chef Cyrus Todiwala and other restaurateurs, such as the Romulo family, in putting up and marketing different restaurants. But I'm also basically a writer, and I've written several books, including 2 books on the Lanesborough Hotel, one with my partner, one with a lady who became my professional colleague and partner, Siobhan Doran. And the reason I'm here today is basically because we just published a book on the houses called That Sugar Built. And these are on ancestral houses in the Philippines. And I think the relationship to today's discussion is the fact that many of these houses have slipped into the hospitality sphere in order to preserve and sustain their existence. So I'm looking forward to this talk.
Thank you, Gina. And Jonathan?
Hi, my name is Jonathan Skinner. I'm from Surrey Hospitality and Tourism Management in the Surrey Business School. My apologies for my blocked nose and throat, and I'm very congested. My background is in anthropology. As an anthropologist, I'm a new member of the Institute. I've been to one event so far in Southwest London, which was really amazing, and I was struck by as Gina's saying, the sort of the interaction between industry and students. My background and interests are in tourism and guiding, festivals and events, and I've worked in the Caribbean looking at our exclusive hotel on the island of Montserrat before, during, and after a volcanic eruption. I've also worked in Belfast for the Maze Longkesh, which is a prison there for political prisoners, and its regeneration sort of committee. And more recently in London, worked with colleagues at Strawberry Hill House, which is a heritage destination where you have a Gothic castle that was built in the 18th century, and looking at it as an award-winning renovation. We've also got a project with a student investigating community engagement in Parma in Italy, looking at the adaptive reuse of a hotel into a modern biophilic designed state-of-the-art tourist destination. So really excited to be here and to hear and to contribute as I can.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan. And James?
Good morning, Sam. Yes, thank you very much for having me. My name is James McComas. I'm the general manager at Chamney's East Royal Manor Hotel and Spa, which is a country house hotel, 16th century country house hotel and spa down just outside Ashford in Kent. I've been working in the industry for 25 years now, and a member of the Institute since 2007, when, funnily enough, Jonathan and I graduated from the University of Surrey Hospitality Management School. I'm very familiar with where you are. My career, I've been lucky, very lucky in my career to have been able to travel a lot. It's taken me around the world, to the States, to New Zealand, and around the UK as well. In the last sort of 12 years or so, really getting into the country house environment, and which is where I've sort of specialised my skill set over the more senior levels of my career. Being involved with the Institute, I've absolutely loved going up through the ranks to fellowship, and in particular, you know, like Gina was saying, the peer-to-peer networking, the opportunities for CPD, and particularly the opportunity to remind ourselves that there's so much more to what we do than just the properties that we run when thinking as an operator. The industry is so wide, so many facets to it, so many different types of role, types of guests, types of consumer that we get to involve ourselves with. So yeah, that's me.
Brilliant, thank you, James. And Michelle.
Thank you, Sam, and good morning, everybody. I'm Michele from Italy, as you can probably hear from my Italian pronunciation of English. I'm the co-founder of Hospital, the Italian Hospitality Academy, which is a company designed and based on enhancing guest experience through training and development of soft skills inside the luxury industry. So I started working in the hospitality industry when I was very young, 16 years old as a waiter, and going through all the career in the front office and the sales marketing then. And then I applied as a training manager in the luxury hospitality chain, in which I stayed for a few years, and then I started my own company. And in starting this company, I came in contact with the Institute of Hospitality in 2020, and for endorsing our training path we delivered to the public in Italy. So I'm very happy to be here because I will be talking with all of you about emotion and connection between emotions and space and architecture. So really looking forward to this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so moving on to today's subject, which is around a remarkable architecture and exceptional hospitality. So we'll dive into the groundbreaking design that goes into aesthetics and shape memorable spaces that evaluate hospitality to an art form, from luxury resorts nestled in natural landscapes to urban retreats that transform cityscapes. We'll uncover the stories, strategies and inspiration behind some of the world's most remarkable projects. So, the intersection of architecture and hospitality, the role of design in shaping guest experiences, moving beyond aesthetics to functionality and emotion, how architecture contributes to storytelling in hospitality spaces, and the significance of blending cultural, historical, and geographical elements into design. Gina, if you can kick off with your view because of the work that you've done for your book, but that intersection of architecture and hospitality is so entwined, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I think if we move back, when we look at architecture, especially in places like England or the United Kingdom, in Europe, and also in Asia, where they have vernacular, a culture vernacular architecture, I think it's very, very important to be mindful of the history, not just of the building itself, but of the country, the people, be mindful of the values that they had and how these structures, these whether there were former hospitals, or there were former mansions, or they were palaces of the aristocracy and royalty, how these actually projected a particular culture. And so that if these were to be adaptively reused, for example, we should be aware of what we should actually be keeping, we should actually be preserving, within those structures. So for example, when I did the research for the Lanesborough Hotel, the very first book, I had to go back and study what the fashion was, what the values were during the Regency period. Okay, because this very much determined what the interior design would be. Okay, what kind of materials, what kind of artifacts they would have inside the hotel. But even before then, I went back and looked at what it was, how it all started. So it all started, I found, as a house, the London house of an Irish aristocrat, which then moved on, it became a hospital, and then a bigger hospital, which was designed by William Wilkins, for example, who also designed the National Gallery. And so it was all of these things that hospitality professionals and the architects and the interior designers and general managers of the hotels, when creating the guest experience, have to take into account, because more and more people want to relive history. It's part of the experience that we're looking for when we purchase a hospitality experience, whether it's in a restaurant, hotel, or elsewhere. So yes, I would say that the history is very important. We have to be aware of what styles, what fashion there was at the time. And I would say this, and I won't go much further. There was a book that was recently published in the UK, and it was called Lost London Interiors. And it's very fascinating, because you see then that a lot of the homes around Belgravia, around Mayfair, were actually built by wealthy families, okay, who then had to give up these houses, maybe because of tax or a change of circumstances. And for example, the Dorchester Hotel, it's built on a property that was called Dorchester House, a former property. The Lansdowne House became part of the Lansdowne. Now we need to find out, we need to know as professionals what the history of these edifices here, so that we can be part of the continuum, historic continuum, as hoteliers or otherwise.
Absolutely, Gina. And Jonathan, your experience internationally as well echoes what Gina's saying, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Gina's written about the vernacular architecture side of things, and that's very apparent in the use and reuse in the Caribbean, for example, in the plantation houses that have become exclusive resorts. And to some extent, they rely upon these structures for authenticity and as Gina was saying, to preserve the integrity of the place. But it has multiple sort of memories and remembrances. These places are, you might say, theoretically heterotopic, and we need to be careful that we're not sort of paying homage to difficult pasts and awkward histories. So, for example, on the island of Montserrat, they have a tourism slogan that the way the Caribbean used to be. And for the tourists visiting the island, they're getting a plantation experience and an exclusive hotel. But for the local peoples, that can hark back to days of enslavement and the sort of barbarities of these structures. So we need to be very mindful of the community, and I think Gina was making that point as well. And these places and the objects around them, they're very useful for the storytelling. One of the areas in Belfast that I'm interested in is the Titanic waterfront, which is Europe's largest regeneration space, and they have the Titanic experience, and next to it you have the Holland and Wharf headquarters that Harcourt developments have turned into what they consider to refer to as half museum, half hotel, and they rely upon artifacts to tell the story of the Titanic. You can walk through the hotel. It's got a nautical theme, but you're also having your food and service in the drawing rooms of where the ships were being designed. You can go up to the viewing galleries where passengers would have had their sort of the marketing of their voyage across the transatlantic, and you can walk into the telephone booth where the sinking of the Titanic would have been relayed. And some people find that a more authentic, more real history and heritage site than the actual museum itself that's adjacent to it. So it's very, very important having this vernacular accoutrement, the add-on factor. Yeah.
If I may add to that, and I agree with what Jonathan said, but if I bring it as well to the Philippines, and now in the Philippines we have this tourism slogan, "Love the Philippines." Now one area that one of the reasons rather why I wanted to do the book was that there were many stereotypes in the Philippines, but not many people knew about this slice of our culture. The fact that we were at the pinnacle of the sugar industry, and there was very much wealth in the Philippines during the 1890s to the 1930s. But for some reason, people never really talk about it. And because the projection of this wonderful culture, and I say wonderful because, of course, it's part of my heritage, my personal heritage, was the construction of these fantastic houses. And a lot of these houses now, I lie, quite a few of them have become what you call this hotels, restaurants. A lot of them become restaurants. And why? Because times have changed. I mean, sugar is no longer the cash crop it was before, but you want to be able to sustain these wonderful structures with beautiful stories behind it. One in particular is a house that received the first papal bull. What does that mean? That means that you could actually say mass in the house in Iloilo. So when you go in, it actually looks like a church. And this is part when the owners, and they do charge a fee now, when they walk guests into the house, it's amazing. They see pews and the colors are ecclesiastical, and they love it. It's wonderful. And then they have a lovely meal. So it's a whole story. You actually enter and discover a new world. And these are Philippine tourists. So not just even foreign tourists. But I'm sure this is a model that's not unique to the Philippines, to Philippine tourism.
Absolutely, Gina. And good to bring you in here, James, because of Eastwell Manor and its history and the story that you tell at Eastwell has that sort of same emotional connection that Gina's talking about in the Philippines, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think, and you said it right there, Sam. Emotional connection, particularly when we're looking at buildings, historical buildings, and certainly in the UK country house market, the reason for your guests' visit is almost purely emotional. You see, we definitely Eastwell, we exclusively deal with people who want to be here, want to come here. There's no need. It's not driven by the brain. It's driven by the heart. To be there, and ensuring therefore that the environment, that the property, that the team, that the experience, it taps into that desire, and that connection is fundamental, and it becomes almost a layering effect, where you have your underlying service, your underlying experience delivery, but if you haven't maintained your property, your architecture, the grounds, the story, then it's your total experience still won't connect, and you'll still be left with sort of half a story from the guest perspective.
And James, how do you tell that story to your guests? How do you can look at a building, but how do you tell that story?
It comes down to your property, to your building, and to the little quirks that go behind it. You know, if we look at Eastwell, just as an example, so we're a 16th century country house, long lineage of ownership, particularly dipping into the royal families, dipping into senior military figures, etc. And so one of the ways that we leverage that story is that every bedroom, rather than having a number on it and you're going up to room 532 or whatever, every bedroom is a name, and it's named after after one of the owners of the time. And you're issued your room key, and it's got the name on your room key. When you get to your front door, you have the coat of arms of the owner, sort of as a crest on your front door. And then once you're inside, there's a nice picture frame. It gives a little bit of spiel about that particular owner, why the room is named after them, what did they achieve when they owned the property, what was their impact on the greater history of Eastwell Manor. And through that, you're able to feed in different elements of the property, different elements of the business. It might be that, you know, we can then guide them through that little bit of spiel in the bedroom. We can guide them to one of the, you know, secluded gardens that was designed by this owner at that particular time, or suggest a walk to the lake where, you know, Queen Victoria was known to have gone ice skating when she came down to visit her son, and, you know, things like that. So, but it really comes down to the super specific little quirks of the property or of the building or of the estate or whatever it is, on making sure that you leverage it, because that is fundamental to what people are going to remember. Ultimately, a country house to a country house to a country house, if you focus on the big, is going to get confusing in the memories, right? Because nearly all country houses have beautiful gardens, you know, so get to the detail, focus on the story, and that will become what's memorable. That's what you can leverage.
Amazing, James. And Michelle, if I could bring you in here, because I think a lot of that, what James is talking about, comes down to team, doesn't it? And delivering that experience and that staff and that training of and that development of the team to tell that story as well, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. I've heard with great interest what Gina, Jonathan, and James told us, and I believe the stronger connection between buildings and experience and emotions is something you can't broke. But you need to focus, and we need to focus to understand that there's not only physical design inside the hospitality. We cannot stop there, because most of our clients and most of the hotels we know in Italy, especially because we have the great opportunity of having a lot of the cultural heritage of the world. And we see a lot of focus on the details of the buildings, which is fine, which is okay. We had a lot of focus by the architects and so on, but in terms of guest experience, in terms of what we can say guest engagement more than experience, we need to focus on human connection. What does it mean? I can have the most beautiful building in the world. I can bring you a lot of examples, maybe in Venice or in Rome or in Florence and so on. But if the people inside the structure is not driven by the heart, as James told us, in giving the true hospitality, and that's a problem. Because structure doesn't make the 100% of the experience. It's just a part of the experience. It is the box. But if the structure has some faults, some issues, I can be, as a guest, more tolerant in tolerate them if I receive a true and genuine hospitality. The opposite is not that true. So there's a strong need because I believe hospitality follows society, and we saw that the hospitality in the last years focus a lot on products, on facilities, and which is very good and which is okay. But I believe it's the mirror of a superficial society at the moment, and we need to come back to true human connection and to understand that luxury is not only a beautiful pool, a beautiful spa, a beautiful ceiling, and a beautiful view on the canal. Luxury is the way we interact with each other. And that's a true point of design in terms of designing the experience of the guest.
Well, if I could pick up on that, I think you're entirely right, because again, I use the Lanesborough as an example, but also when I was teaching in Paris, I was working with luxury hotels, and what they said was, you know, the common denominator with luxury is a beautiful space. You know, and whether it's a what you call this, a former palazzo or a former, you know, ancestral home in the Philippines or Toronto or wherever, but the difference it made, the difference you make is when you make somebody feel like they're coming home. Okay, of course, if it's luxury, if you're working the luxury space, of course you'll have beautiful furniture, you'll have the perfect lighting. But what's important is when somebody walks through the door, it's how you greet them, for example. It's still the intuitive, still the intuitive service. But of course, if people have the money to spend, they would like the intuitive service in a wonderful, beautiful hotel like Champty's, for example. So yes,
Yeah.
I always come to that.
And so if I may add just one thing to what Gina said, and then Jonathan, I give you the word. That's totally perfect because we need to understand that in order to make this business, hospitality business, also more attractive to the young people, because a lot of examples I can bring up. We have beautiful spaces, beautiful hotels with problem of people working in it, and they have a lack of people. They can't find the right people to deliver the service they want to deliver. And I believe the point we are talking today is very, very important also for the students that are listening to us, because we have the responsibility to make this business more attractive. And the basic and the starting point, in my opinion, is the human connection. So thank you, Gina, for adding this.
Can I just add to the storytelling, the sense of it at an exclusive luxury level, at being very individualized or personalized, so that storytelling can actually be like a self-discovery activity. So it's wandering through that sort of quiet garden that James was talking, or it's going through the Four Seasons in Istanbul and seeing the graffiti from prisoners from this converted premises, or in the Belfast Titanic, it's about going into the male urinals, and there's actually the remnants of a safe as a deposit box from before the conversion activities. So that reanimation of space, you're making it a smooth experience for the visitor and the tourist. You've still got those quirks, as James was saying, but you're still having a sort of a sense of what it was like, but you're not anesthetizing the aesthetics that you're actually relying upon. You're creating something that's meaningful and personalized as a self-discovery storytelling, even if you're helping and assisting along the way.
Absolutely, Jonathan. And I think that brings us nicely onto the second half of our webinar, which we want to talk around design, sustainability and accessibility, because once we have all these beautiful buildings and we're telling this beautiful story, are they fit for the modern world, and how do we make the modern world fit into our historical buildings. And James, if I could come to you first to talk about some of the challenges you have of a grade 2, grade 1 listed building,
Yeah, East Wall is
and
grade 2.
making that grade 2 listed building, and how you make that accessible for today's guests and customers, and rightly so. Everybody should be welcome, but the challenges that faces you from an operational point of view, from a sales and marketing point of view as well.
Sure. So, I mean, the challenges, particularly around accessibility, and to a certain extent, although arguably slightly lesser extent, sustainability. The challenges with heritage buildings are significant, as we say, when we look at accessibility in particular, and that stems from the fact that typically, you know, when we talk about accessibility and accessibility requirements, operators and designers and builders, etc., are looking at it from a list of requirements perspective. It's a very black and white sort of needs list. I must have this many accessible rooms. I must have ramps of no more of this degree. I must have this system for summoning help, etc., etc. And but what it misses is the why behind that. And if we can look at the why early enough in the process, when we're talking about refurbishments or developments, etc., if we can look at that why, then we can start to think about and start to figure out ways of delivering that accessibility that doesn't require us to go, I don't know, screwing particular bars into particular walls, or, you know, trying to figure out, well, I've got this beautiful curved staircase that's 400 years old. Can I get a wheelchair up it? No. You know, 500-year-old buildings don't typically have lift shafts. You know, so but if the opportunity is taken at the right time, at the point of development and point of refurbishment, and we look at what is it we're trying to deliver and why do we need to think about it, rather than just, okay, I've got to have a room that with this in it and this in it and this in it and this in it, then we're able to flex a little bit more. You know, from an Eastwell perspective, we are challenged by the fact that the manor house, which is where the majority of our guests want to stay, has a minuscule lift shaft. It's very, very small, not big enough for a standard wheelchair now. None of the floors are flat, and all the corridors have steps in. Right, so from a basic accessibility perspective, it's an absolute nightmare. So what we've done is created little zones on the 2-bedroom floors in the manor house where we can store the right kind of ramps to be able to mitigate the steps within the corridors. We have a number of rooms which are kitted out from a physical perspective, but it's been done in a way that is in keeping with the rest of the bedroom stock and the rest of the property, to try and avoid those situations where you inevitably wind up with a guest who doesn't have any particular accessibility requirements in a room that has accessibility facilities. You know, and that helps us to sort of mitigate the needs. But the other half of the coin is the way that you communicate the facilities that you do have, and, you know, make sure that you are effectively setting the expectations of all of your guests, regardless of their needs, as early as possible. Because the worst possible thing that you can happen, especially from an accessibility perspective, is that you're unclear or you're not specific about what you have, what you don't have, what you can, what you can't do, and somebody arrives with an assumption because, well, this is the basic list. There must be this facility, that facility, that facility. Maybe they're not used to staying in country house hotels. Maybe they're not used to staying in listed buildings. Maybe they haven't thought about the fact that lift shafts just aren't naturally, however big a lift shaft needs to be for a wheelchair, you know. So ensuring that we communicate that, whether that's via website information, whether that's via, you know, pre-arrival calls, etc., to ensure that guests with accessibility needs in particular are aware of what it is you can offer, what you do offer, and therefore their expectations are going to be aligned with what you're able to deliver. Everybody's going to be happy.
That's great. Thanks, James. Yeah, it sounds like huge challenges, but like you said, a lot of it does come down to communications, isn't it, with the guest on pre-arrival.
100%.
Jonathan, Gina, and Michelle, from your international experience, what have you seen from globally about how our other properties overcome this challenge?
I think there has to be an acceptance that if you want to sustain a beautiful building, if you want to retain the integrity of what has become a monument, a heritage monument, like some of the beautiful houses in London and the Philippines, for example, you will have to accept the fact that there might be some certain areas that are off limits. I think that's just I think that would be common sense. And I imagine that might, Michelle, be the case as well in places like Venice, for example. But that doesn't mean that, but I think that I think architects or town planners, etc., have to make a decision. Hello?
Yeah.
Hello, yes, hear you.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
It's all right. Have to make a decision on how much to expose to footfall, for example, because if there's too much exposure to the public, for example, our old house in the Philippines that has become a sort of event space, my ancestral house. At some point, they had to it's not ours anymore, by the way. It was bought by a conglomerate. But there was at some point, I think it was about last year, when they didn't allow people to go up to the second floor because the wood was made for little, families, etc., and not for hordes of tourists and visitors. So that was off limits for a while. So I'm sure there are other examples, but that's just a very basic principle, I think. You can't have it all. Essentially.
That being said, we I think as operators, particularly as hotel operators, and the design stage, we can be very guilty of saying, "Oh, we can't possibly do that to our building. Look at the age, look at the history. We'll just say no. It's listed. The council won't allow it, etc., etc." Increasingly, the technology and the capacities are there to make some really stunning sort of adaptations to buildings. You only have to look at places like the Kimpton Fitzroy in the city in London, which has, I don't know what it is, maybe it's 6 or 8 steps to get up off the street to the main lobby, and it's a beautiful listed building again, but they've been able to effectively replace half of their beautiful stone steps with a design where the steps retract and your accessibility lift comes around a corner and can then go up and down. But you'd never know. You'd never know if you were just looking at it as a Joe public. You'd look at that building and go, wow, that's really beautiful, and what an amazing entrance. And then at the press of a button, you're there in a wheelchair, and suddenly your steps go back, and it's amazing. So there are opportunities and facilities increasingly, which we have to accept are there and can be done as operators, albeit not necessarily cheaply.
Yeah.
Can I just, sorry, I'm very bad at interrupting.
Please, Jonathan, please.
Just really to add and reiterate on what Gina and James have been saying, it's about accommodating the needs of the present. It's about preserving the past. It's about retaining that integrity activity that's made the attraction, the structure particularly interesting and important. And it's a balancing act. Then you've got to have some compromise in that reanimation of the past. Energy systems are completely different. Our relationship with the natural world is different. So you might want to have biophilic designs. You might want to have different plants going in. Health and safety, as we've heard, is very different. And even the idea or the notion of hospitality is changing over time and space culturally. Our work in Parma, the Palazzo dell'Agricoltura, is a commercial agricultural bank with rationalist architecture from the 1920s, and it's being repurposed as a state-of-the-art 5-star hotel. But it's also going to be more than that. It's going to be a home for the visitor, so that they're going to get their luxuries. They're going to have that smooth transition, but they're going to still have the aesthetics of the past. They're going to have the spa experience, but they're also going to be able to see the stucco plaster of what the bank was advertising on the walls in the 1920s and 30s. So it's retaining that and at the same time fulfilling those expectations of our present day clientele. Michelle.
Yeah. I want to highlight from the Venetian experience in this sense about sustainability and making places the more accessible possible. And of course, I totally agree with James, Jean, and Jonathan. We need to find a balance in that, because as you can imagine, 15th century buildings in the heart of Venice, which has its own difficulties, also, mainly because of reaching it. And we need to find a sort of balance in this, in terms of accessibility of the floors and the rooms, because I agree that everything cannot be accessible, so it's not possible. But I want to highlight some examples of how technology is working in this direction. There are some clients we have in Venice, some luxury properties, which are making the 3D vision of the rooms and the places that are not accessible to the people that have disabilities. So they are giving them the opportunities to wear these glasses, and they can full experience. Of course, it's not the same, because you are not in front of the real fresco or the real sculpture of Canova or so on, but you can feel the building. You can feel the space, and this is a great, in my opinion, innovation and integration of technology in this kind of hospitality, because of course technology can do a lot, and I believe these examples, others examples spread around the world, which are very similar to this one, can help people to fully enjoy a place which is not fully accessible because of its historical heritage.
That's great, Michelle. And I think also what's good about that is that people have varying accessibility needs as well. So, you know, if you can show them the route to their room through a virtual platform, then they might be able to say, well, actually, I could manage a couple of steps down, but that flight of stairs that James was talking about to the entrance in the street to the hotel is just too much for me. But 2 steps down or 2 steps up into my actual room or around that corridor, and I can see that through the virtual goggles before I actually get there, actually works quite well. So yeah, I think that would helps. Jonathan,
Can I add to that? One of the activities we're trying to do in the shaping of this new hotel is to try out different designs, and we can not only use the sort of the virtual realities, but we have biometric wristbands where you can measure the physiological reactions that someone has to the designs of the room. So when we've done a mock-up of a room, you can get the person to walk in and appreciate it. We film what they're seeing, so you get the first-person point of view, and then you can take their skin sense responses. So you can actually tweak the design of the architecture in that design phase to accommodate the expectations that the tourist has got. And I think that's a really exciting sort of trajectory that sort of the design phase in the architectural hospitality is starting to take.
And that just all adds, Jonathan, doesn't it, to that personalisation of architecture, and you know that what hospitality is all about, isn't it? Is that experiential stay. You know, nobody really now goes away just to sleep. You know, it's for that experience, and what you're doing there. The future of hospitality design is so important, isn't it?
Yeah. Can I say that it's very interesting that the Gothic castle I'm looking at also in Twickenham in London was built in the 1760s by an eccentric socialite, Horace Walpole, and he played with architecture and textures of walls. He used papier-mâché with sort of chintz. He used sort of different shapes and structures in the walls. He created a medieval effect in one, a sort of Turkish boudoir in another, and he was deliberately playing with the effect that he would have upon the visitor. He even came up with the concept of gloop, the sort of mixture of warmth but with gloominess to get and to elicit a reaction. So it's interesting how even in the sort of contemporary technological age of hypermodernity, postmodernity, we're still doing sometimes similar things that people have been doing across the centuries, but using what's available for our repositioning of these structures for the experience.
No,
I guess that adds to that sustainability element as well, doesn't it? Using that and yeah, excellent. Gina, sorry, cutting.
I'm sorry, no, just very quickly. I think over Christmas, my family and I had lunch in this place called the Lord Crew Arms. It was in Northumberland, and I think it was an old monastery or something. Tiny, tiny little village, just outside, just near Sea House, near Alnwick, in Northumberland. My husband's from Northumberland, and it's incredible. And it was such an old structure, and with high staircases that even I have difficulty going up. But the way they've done it is they made use of little corridors, little cave-like spaces to make a pub, a restaurant, etc. And if you want to climb up to what they call the Bishop's Restaurant, the Bishop's Roof, which is supposed to be their sort of fine dining, you would have to be willing to do that. But then they didn't make the Lord Crew Arms itself inaccessible to people who could not, because they just made use of every bit of space, and they had gardens. So I thought that was a really wonderful use of architecture, architecturally significant building, for hospitality purposes.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gina, for that story. And I think that brings us nicely to the end of this conversation today. And it's been great. We've been from the Garden of England with James in Ashford in Kent to Venice in Italy and to Manila in the Philippines. We've really experienced a global architecture for the hospitality sector, which is just brilliant. So thank you so much, James, Michelle, Gina and Jonathan, for your time today. We're really grateful for your expertise and input. Just to remind everybody that's listening in to record this webinar as part of your CPD hours on your IoH members dashboard. And we will see you again soon for our next webinar in February. We have another webinar coming up soon next week regarding the aesthetics in hospitality. So it falls on quite nicely from what we've been talking about today. But I hope you all have a wonderful day, and thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, James. Bye.